Alba and Stephen Ferguson were happily married and living in Grand Rapids, Michigan. They felt the desire to add to their family again a few years after the birth of their fourth biological child. Having another child in the house would not be easy, but they knew that after going through it 4 times before. At the very least, they knew that the family's finances were in order and that having another child was a possibility. Despite the fact that they could still conceive naturally, the couple chose to adopt an orphan child. The desire to help a child in need grew even stronger after Alba and Stephen saw a television documentary that stated there were over 400,000 orphan children in the United States. Alba combined this information with her long-term desire to make a difference in the world, which Stephen shared. However, the couple agreed to adopt a more mature child because they no longer felt they had the disposition that a baby requires. So, Stephen and Alba Ferguson made the decision to begin the progress. For Alba, it was more about wanting to give love and better conditions to a child who, without them, might not have had any of these things in life. However, choosing a child is not an easy task, as this couple was about to discover. Aside from a lot of red tapes, the process entails getting to know several children, learning their stories, being charmed by them, and having to forget about them because there is no way to keep them all. And the desired adopted child is not always the first child you get to know. The emotional side of the process is very costly, and the Fergusons needed to be a little cold-blooded until they reached the decision stage. Additionally, Alba kept exploring available adoption services, which is how she learned that Uganda has over 3 million orphans. Alba was agitated by this statistic. She was losing sleep over the number of children who did not have families or permanent homes. After much consideration, the couple decided to adopt a child from Uganda. With this decision made, they expected the process to proceed smoothly, but the problems had only just begun. The couple contacted a Ugandan adoption agency. They had to fill out hundreds of forms and write checks for large sums of money. The total cost was in the 5 figures, not including the many hours they spent filling out paperwork to prove that they had good intentions, enough income to raise another child, and that they would take full responsibility for the child. It wasn't easy at all, and neither was it as quick as they had hoped. But Alba and Stephen were determined to keep going until they reached the best part of the process, which would be choosing and meeting a child. Alba and Stephen were granted permission to adopt in Uganda after a year of paperwork and waiting. There were so many options, children of all shapes and sizes, that it was difficult to choose one. They took care not to learn anything about any of the children so that their decision would not be influenced. And then, one day, they met Namazi, a 6-year-old Ugandan girl. Alba and Stephen thoroughly enjoyed their meeting with her. The young girl appeared to be intelligent and active, and she didn't seem to be suspicious of them. She was also in the age bracket the couple was considering. Alba felt obliged to learn more about Namazi because she believed Namazi was a very good choice, but she was not prepared to learn in detail how harsh life in Uganda could be. According to the social worker who accompanied the couple throughout the adoption process, Namazi's father died a few years ago. The girl ended up living solely with her mother, who abandoned her at a young age, barely able to speak properly due to financial difficulties. She spent 3 days alone until a local found her and alerted authorities. She was dehydrated and in the early stages of malnutrition when she arrived at the hospital. Namazi had been in an orphanage for 4 years, waiting for a new family. This background sparked the couple's emotions, and they had no more doubts. As if everything went as planned, Namazi would most likely be their chosen one. They were enchanted by her and expressed their desire to give her a home and call her their daughter. However, Alba and Stephen were unaware that the girl's history presented to them was incomplete. Unfortunately, there was much of the girl's past that was yet to be revealed. From then on, the search for children to adopt was stopped, and the process ran its course. The entire Ferguson family was in front of a judge in just a few months. Alba, Stephen, and their 4 children, as well as the social worker and the family lawyer, were present. Everyone present shared the desire to see the process through after more than a year and a half of struggle, and the judge in the case acknowledged that everything appeared to be in order with the papers that were submitted. He especially noted the Ferguson's family's determination to find the girl. Because of all of this, the judge finally approved Namazi's adoption. The Ugandan girl had a new family in the United States from that point forward. Namazi spoke no English when she arrived in Grand Rapids, but it only took a few months for her to understand and communicate with her siblings and classmates. She also spoke with Alba and Stephen, telling them about her birth mother, how much she loved her, how she enjoyed going to church in the park, and how she enjoyed cooking with her mother. Namazi's English was still not perfect, but like any 6-year-old, she was learning quickly. Fast enough, in fact, that the couple realized the adoption agency's accounts of Namazi's past had to be incorrect. As the girl improves her communication skills, the situation surrounding the adoption appeared to worsen. They remembered learning from the girl's file from the social worker that her early years had been difficult, with her father's death and her mother's abandonment. Namazi turned out to have many fond memories of her Ugandan family, particularly her birth mother. It was strange that a girl who had spent 4 years in an orphanage could remember things she had done with her family. Was she making those things up in order to fill the emotional void left by abandonment? Alba and Steven had no idea what it was, but they were definitely not ready for the biggest surprise of their lives. It became impossible to ignore the stories Namazi told about her family as time passed. Even though she had no problems living with her new family and had adapted well to the climate and culture of her new country, she kept giving too many details of events that, according to official documents, should not have occurred because they would have occurred when she was no longer with her family. Alba and Steven informed the adoption agency of the situation, but the agency stuck to the official story. The mother had abandoned the child. There was something wrong with that process in those documents, or at the very least, the couple felt that key elements of the story were missing. Before taking any drastic measures, Alba and Steven took Namazi to psychologists to see if the stories she was telling about her mother were not a reaction to the trauma of abandonment, an imagination mechanism of the brain activated to fight the pain of reality. However, none of the psychologists consulted found any evidence of trauma that could lead to the use of imagination as a defense. As a result, every piece of information Namazi was able to communicate became an important clue, making Alba and Steven increasingly suspicious. 3 very big and unforgettable fears were growing in Alba: that the daughter they had adopted was not truly an orphan, that what was in her file was a lie, and worst of all, that someone had manipulated a mother so that Namazi could live in a house in Grand Rapids, thousands of miles away from her biological family. So, the couple resolved to get to the bottom of this mysterious story, which had misled the Ugandan and American legal systems. Alba and Steven did this by hiring a European adoption agency with African adoption experience. It took nearly 8 months for the investigators to obtain all of the necessary documents, but the dossier they presented to the Fergusons shocked the family. They couldn't believe they'd been a part of something like this. Namazi's biological mother's whereabouts were revealed in the dossier. At the Fergusons' request, the European agency even contacted her and set up a video call between the 2 families. During this call, Alba and Steven learned the most difficult truth of their lives. Namazi's family lived in Uganda and were all ordinary workers. An entity had offered the girl a scholarship to study in the United States. It was an exchange program in which her family would receive money in order for the girl to attend and receive a first-world education. It was a joint initiative between the governments of the United States and Uganda. The family agreed, believing it was the best thing for the girl. Alba and Steven were informed that this entity took the girl away from the family prior to the alleged exchange, claiming that they needed to prepare her to stay away from her family and learn the culture of the new country. Namazi's biological mother had no idea her daughter had been legally adopted by foreign parents. The girl's birth mother was in tears, unable to believe what had happened to her. During this call, they discovered that the same agent who negotiated Namazi's exchange had also made the same offer to at least 8 other local families, all of whom had children around Namazi's age at the time. The dossier compiled by the European Investigation Agency completed the puzzle. After being taken from her family, Namazi ended up in an orphanage and was placed in the official adoption system with a fabricated story. It was the type of scam that involved a large number of people, from orphanage workers to government officials and a human trafficking ring. Alba and Steven were stunned and absolutely devastated. When they decided to adopt a Ugandan child, they never imagined such a thing could happen, especially after all of the paperwork, checks, and fees they had to pay. Namazi's father had died, and receiving American money for their daughter to participate in an exchange pleased her birth mother. It truly appears to be a blessing, but she definitely had not given up her daughter for adoption. The problem is that after the girl left home, her Ugandan family never heard from her again. That was when the birth mother realized that there was something strange going on, but her contact at the exchange agency informed her that Namazi was doing well and adapting, and it would be counterproductive for the mother to intervene at this time. And after, she never found this contact again. Something had happened, and the woman had been unable to reverse the process. The American couple was completely disturbed by what they had just learned. Both the adoptive parents and the birth mother had been deceived. Alba and Steven loved the girl, who was now 7 years old and living with them, but they knew they had to make amends and return her to her biological family. To effect the reunion, the couple sought assistance from the US government. Despite the fact that they presented all of the evidence of the scam, the authorities stated that they could not intervene in the situation. It was up to the couple to arrange Namazi's reunion with her family. However, the adoption was judicially annulled, and the American couple spent 3 days filing out additional paperwork to process the girl's return to her biological mother. Then, they purchased tickets and set a date for the reunion. They threw a big farewell party the day before they left. Namazi was loved by Alba, Steven, and the couple's 4 children, and they were sad to see her go. Many people thought the couple was naive. If they talked to the biological mother, they might agree to let them keep her daughter. What does she have to lose? Alba and Steven, on the other hand, knew that this was not how a mother's heart felt. What had begun as an adoption journey had turned into a fight for justice. Several other families had been victimized by the same scam, and the Fergusons wanted to fight these evil forces by helping anyone they could. Steven and Namazi flew to Uganda on the agreed-upon date. Alba and her 4 children stayed back in Grand Rapids. They were all in tears as they said their final goodbyes. But it was exciting to know that they would soon be correcting a crime. Namazi was very excited to be reunited with her mother. Steven and Namazi arrived in Uganda and proceeded to a rural area of the country. He was nervous about their reunion and wouldn't let the girl out of his sight for even a second. Steven and Namazi's hearts raced when the car came to a halt, and they saw the girl's family waiting through the window. Namazi would finally get to see her mother after all this time. And Steven was going to lose the girl he had fought for over a year. But he knew it was all for the best, and he was relieved for Namazi and her mother. The girl's biological mother didn't even wait for her to get out of the car and ran straight to the vehicle. They hugged each other tightly, and the little girl's clothes were soon soaked in her mother's tears. Steven too shed a tear. It was the last time he'd see the bright and active little girl who had won his heart. Back in the United States, Alba and her children were able to witness their reunion through photos and videos. Alba found it all both painful and beautiful. She couldn't imagine what it was like to be separated from one of her children for almost 3 years. The Fergusons never lost contact with Namazi in the months that followed, and they were able to see how this family, now restored, was happy and doing very well in Uganda. Alba and Steven fought to help more families who were victims of scams after spending over $65,000 on fake adoption and having their genuine feelings exploited for profit by unscrupulous people. Thanks to the couple's efforts, the adoption agency that handled Namazi's adoption ceased to exist. And they're not going to stop there. There are numerous other companies and entities around the world that conceal human trafficking scams. And as Alba now says, their love has grown and transformed. It is from this love that they now draw strength to help not only those who need to adopt a child, but also those who need to reclaim their own children. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a like, and this other video that is appearing on your screen will most likely move you as well. Have a nice day, and we'll see you in the next video.